Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter, or of course you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. We're going to talk about the masterclass from Shakur Stevenson and some of the things that OSCAR VALDEZ really could have done and should have done to give him more chance of winning, because there are certain gaps that you might seek to exploit against Shakur Stevenson. He's a very, very special talent, a pound for pound level talent, but nobody is unbeatable, and there are areas where he could have had more success. We'll also talk about Shakur Stevenson and the potential of him going up to 135. A lot of people have asked me this. What is your take on this, Chris? Do you think he will clean out the 135 division? Is he that dominant? He could potentially clean it out, but he could also potentially lose to more than one guy there, stylistically speaking. We'll get to that later on. First and foremost, let's talk about Jesse Vargas and Liam Smith. The fight went exactly as I thought it would go, to be honest with you. Jesse Vargas, a lot of straight punches, solid shots. You know that Liam Smith's going to come in early behind that high guard, accept the fact that he's going to absorb a lot of punishment, but he puts himself constantly into a range whereby you have to work. If you don't work, he's going to hit you. So you work to try and keep him off, and you're really trying to land some big shots to keep him off, right? And he cuts easily. He's got that scar tissue. So what happens is when you hit the guy and you cut him, and you might have frozen his legs one or two occasions, you start to feel encouraged and you think, you know what, maybe I can get this guy out of there. And you really start planting your feet, looking to get rid of him. You don't want to move too much. You don't want to be hunted too much in case you lose, you run out of gas, you lose your steam and so on and so forth. So instead you decide you're going to hurt this guy. And then he reads your patterns, gets behind a very effective and underrated jab to close the range, and then he takes you into the trenches. A little bit Jarrell Miller-esque. He's not a size guy like Jarrell Miller, but the thought process behind a lot of the stuff he does is fairly similar. And that's what he was able to do to Jesse Vargas. He's got an awful lot left in the tank. He's a very dangerous guy. And I like watching Liam Smith. I like it's basic and a little bit crude in the way he goes about it, but it's very, very effective. You also saw Galaya fight last night. A lot of people have been critical of him. So a lot of people say, he gets hit way too much to be a success. The thing is, if he's got a good chin and he relies on that chin, he's going to be willing to exchange. Now, of course, when you come up against a puncher, you have to be a little bit more responsible. But I have the feeling with Galaya that he's the sort of guy that takes shots because he's not wary of what's coming back at him, because on occasion you do see he'll be landing a couple, take half a step back, see a shot whiz by him, and then come back in. So he can employ distance control. He just chooses to be a pressure fighter. So he's got that wrinkle in his game. He just doesn't use it as much. But I like him. He doesn't overload on all of his shots. Offensively, he's very, very good. At times he'll square up a little bit, almost like a karate fighter, throw straight shots, almost like he's throwing a jab with a power hand, but it's heavy. Everything he throws is heavy whilst being effortless. It's not heavy with him loading up. It's heavy naturally for that weight category. So he's a guy that I'm impressed with, even though there is some work to do there defensively speaking, but he's definitely a guy to keep an eye on in the future. Let's talk about the mastery of Shakur Stevenson, and he is indeed a master. The central element of his game, and he is good at a whole variety of things, right? But the central element to me when it comes to Shakur Stevenson is his cat-like reflexes, which enable the consummate control of distance. He will keep you guessing with little feints, particularly with his feet, these little half-step feints and stuff like that. If he reads a little twitch, a little movement of yours where you're trying to launch yourself in or trying to edge your feet in and things like that, he processes it so quickly. Use the analogy of a computer, right? And I'm actually going to do a video on Anthony Joshua and Alexander Usyk, which discusses the scientific concept of visual processing and how AJ might want to at points bypass that and engage more in a sort of feeling approach, a touch approach, rather than the visual processing element. A lot of you are going to think, what are you banging on about, Chris? It will make more sense when I make the video, I promise you. But Wing Chun fighters might know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about feeling. But the point is that visual perception, the speed at which you process is just such a high level of Shakur. I want you to imagine you've got a laptop, right? And it's a brand new laptop, very high spec. You press enter, and before you've even lifted your finger off the enter button, it's processed everything that you've sent, right? An email, whatever it might be, you've opened a tab, it's instantly open. If you've got quite an old, slow laptop, you'll press the enter button, it's clogged up. You'll see a second, you'll see the little egg timer come up on the screen, and then it shows up. Well, that information that you're giving the computer is processed, and then it gives you the result, the reaction to what it is you've asked it to do. Shakur Stevenson has the most incredible visual perception, the visual processing speed. Anything you do, he sees it and takes half a step back. Now, a guy like OSCAR VALDEZ, who perhaps doesn't have the fastest feet in the world anymore. His feet were faster in the past, I believe. But I do think he's not got the fastest feet in the sport. But what he does do is close range quite effectively, particularly with that right hand. He'll throw the right hand down the pipe and shift with it. Something Golovkin does, right? He'll throw the right hand, he'll disguise it, he'll line you up with the right hand, he'll throw the right hand, and then his back foot comes forward and he's closed the range. And that right hand has frozen you up, basically. He's landed, frozen you up, and then he's up close again and he's ready to go to work. He can throw the left hook on the inside arc of your hooks now because his left shoulders come towards more of a central area of your body in terms of lines, and so he's able to throw these left hooks inside the arc of your hook after that if he wants to, and stuff like that. He's able to land the right hand and potentially come around your shoulder and so on and so forth. With Shakur Stevenson, though, he's so good at taking that step back that even if you shoot that right hand, he so quickly processes it that when he was landing it at points, and he was having success with it at points, he was getting low and shooting it up, he'd land, but the distance is maintained. You've semi-landed and then he's further back again, right? And you've got to work again at trying to get back inside. You haven't created a new angle against him. And that's when you're leading off. When he's leading off, when he wants to initiate an attack, one of the things he'll often do is basically use the lead hand in a similar way to Errol Spence and then bring about a backhand attack and exit in a similar way to Errol Spence. Errol Spence has got a very consistent jab. I showed you this in the preview to the Spence-Ugas fight. But it's not a jab that will always necessarily bust you up. He's capable of doing that. But sometimes he just likes to put it out there and he'll use it as misdirection or he'll use it as a rangefinder. Now, last night the commentary team were referring to how Stevenson was using it as a rangefinder. At times, Stevenson even got told off, threatened to lose a point because he was using his hand to blind the opponent, just literally having it over his face. Something you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to keep your hand there for an extended period of time. But what he was doing essentially is affecting the vision of VALDEZ. Now, they don't leave it out quite as long, but this is something that Rigondeaux would often do, that Lomachenko would often do, that Errol Spence can do too. And he'll touch you, and then come downstairs with a backhand to the body, or even to the head. It could be, a backhand around the guard, through the guard. He's very varied. We'll get to that in a moment. But the point is, he's using that jab essentially to set up another more powerful shot on numerous occasions, and then once he lands that shot, he pulls out quickly. He's anticipating a counterattack, a Dillian White type hair trigger counter. He's expecting that. He's anticipating that. And he's got such cat-quick reflexes, he'll land and then pull out, and your shot falls short. You then decide to initiate your own attack. He takes that other step back. So he's constantly messing with distance and affecting you. And he's got this incredible ability, Shakur Stevenson, as well, to vary his own shots. He disguises them so well. Is that backhand going to come to the belly? Is it going to come through the guard? Is it going to come around the guard? He's very accurate with it. And so what happens is you start to overreach. And unlike some of the other guys that VALDEZ has fought, guys like Berchelt, for instance, who were running after him and falling over their front foot, and he's able to time them and land, a big left hook or land a right hand as they're coming in. Shakur Stevenson doesn't do that. His stance can be quite narrow, and he'll take that step out, but he's quite narrow, so he's got the ability to then step away. This isn't a guy who's got quite a wide stance who then relies on upper body movement. He's almost European, like a fluid European fighter in that sense, where he's almost a little bit upright and he can take steps back quickly and change the distance on you very, very quickly. And what you saw is by the second round, it became apparent to me that VALDEZ's approach was all wrong. Okay, he wasn't getting his feet close enough. He was trying to come with a high guard, crouching down. And yes, I understand he typically likes to fight out of a high guard. I get it. But you have to also be able to adapt to your opponent. And when you're coming in low and you're just, you're hoping that high guard's going to somehow protect you with shots off of the forearms and elbows when it's quite a passive guard and you're up against someone who's so accurate, it's suicide. So by the second round, I was tweeting to say, listen, he needs to channel in some of that Marcos Maidana energy and just turn this into a brawl. Land some low blows, man. So what? Throw over the top shots that are coming over the top at unorthodox angles. If he was with Ryan Garcia rather than somebody like Eddie Reynoso, and I know a lot of people are going to get furious at this. How can you question Eddie Reynoso? I actually think he would have done a better job though if he was with Ryan Garcia. He needed to make this a fight, but not just a blind brawl where he's just throwing punches and winging them in. They've got to be coming in at unorthodox angles, angles that are coming sort of over the top, angles whereby hit him in the legs, man. Hit him in the thigh a couple of times. Try and give him a dead leg. What's going to happen? You're going to lose a point. You ain't winning this fight on points, bro. You've got to work a strategy out whereby you're able to bust him up and break him down. Now, this thing of let me have a high guard and try and box, and then if I can't manage to do that, I'll come on strong late. That's not going to work, because by the time you then decide I'm going to go for plan B, you've been busted up way too much. He had to adapt from the second round, in my humble opinion. The third round, he actually did well. And that was more of a swing round. He was letting his hands go. I actually edged that to Shakur as well, but they landed an awful lot on each other. And listen, to be fair, Valdez landed more shots on Shakur Stevenson than anybody else has landed in history. And one of the reasons was Shakur Stevenson has this brilliant ability, like I said, to maintain distance. But sometimes when you're getting him close up to the ropes, when he's halfway between the center of the ring and the ropes, and he's not in the center of the ring, if you imagine you've got the four sides, right? He's not in the central area towards the ropes, but he's slightly more towards one side or the other. Say the final third, if you're to break each side of a ring into three, if he's towards the final third on either side, so there's a corner coming up. When you then decide that you're going to launch in, because his defense primarily, this is not the only thing, right? But primarily is distance based. He will sometimes come out of that Philly shell and he'll lean back, but he's taking that step back. It's his feet predominantly that give him the best form of defense for him. Sometimes when he steps back and he moves back onto the ropes and you are able to get sort of in that inner mid-range area, you do have space to hit him. Mainly to the body is where Valdez was able to find that space, and much of it was to do with when he wasn't able to when he steps back and he's got his back up against the ropes, he'll either try and pivot out, or on occasion he was able to get him to square up, and then from there he's either trying to tie up or basically trying to move sideways to get out. There's a point there, a moment where you can land a shot, and he was loading up with some big hooks to the body, was Oscar Valdez. And because when he was stepping out, sometimes he'd get the outer angle too. He'd be lining up that hook through the center line, and he'd be lining up some big powerful hooks to the solar plexus. And sometimes when he didn't have that inner arc to land that angle, he'd just come around and land to the left side of Shakur Stevenson's ribs. The left hand got taken away from him. You expect that, I guess, with a guy like Shakur Stevenson, who's going to know that, this guy's got a monster left hook. He's also a southpaw. I'll always hide my chin behind that shoulder, something we spoke about with Tyson Fury when we spoke about him potentially going southpaw in the preview against Dillian White. Shakur Stevenson's more than capable of doing stuff like that too. So although the left hook got taken away from Valdez, the right hand was there for him, potentially even to the head. Because even when he's pulling back and he's leaning out, when he's got the ropes behind him, there's only a certain amount of distance. If you've got your foot on the outside of that pivoting line, so he can't pivot out and get out, there's only a certain amount of distance he can generate when leaning back. And if your feet were close enough, and there were numerous occasions where his feet were close enough, he should have been arching the hook to the head on occasion instead of solely focusing on the body. When he was trying to do it to the head early in the fight, he was falling way too short, sometimes falling flat on his face, right? Face planting, and made to look stupid. But just because you can't land on him in the center of the ring with those big shots, looping shots, it doesn't mean you can't do it when he's up against the ropes. So I would have wanted to have seen him make it more unorthodox in terms of the trajectory of his punches, switching it up with more orthodox shots on the inside, going from body to head, switching that up as well and going from head to body sometimes, just basically making yourself unorthodox with varied patterns. He wasn't able to do that. Instead, he was getting busted up. He was getting lit up like a Christmas tree. I had Shakur Stevenson winning every round. I didn't think the knockdown was a knockdown. It was one of those scenarios where he's overreaching because he was frustrated and he couldn't land on him. It was more of a cupping shot to the back of the head, not really a punch. He sort of fell into the ropes, and as he's turned, he's tried to cover up to avoid the uppercut, and the uppercut sort of hit his gloves, but he was so off balance and practically on the floor that he fell down. So it wasn't a knockdown for me, but nonetheless, he won every round, Shakur Stevenson, except for maybe the third, which was a swing round. If he was to move up to 135 pounds, a lot of people have asked me, do you think he would clean up the division? Listen, this is a very special talent, and he's got the ability to. A lot of people say to me, is he big enough? Listen, he's a lot bigger than Lomachenko. If you see him standing next to these lightweights, he's bigger than a lot of them. Devin Haney's also massive at the weight, right? He might be bigger than Shakur Stevenson. If you watch Devin Haney standing next to Canelo whenever they greet each other, check out a photo. I'm talking about broadness as well as height, right? He's not as barrel-chested as Canelo. He's not as thick-set, but it doesn't look like there's much of a size difference in the way they walk around, right? So Haney's also big at the weight category, but Lomachenko is a small lightweight. Now, Loma, if he would be able to work his way in, they're both fantastic with the way they manipulate the opponent's guard. They'll get forearms across the face, pivot out and stuff like that to work from there. I think Lomachenko is better slightly at being destructive up close, although Shakur Stevenson is brilliant on the inside too, and he too will manipulate the guard. But they operate in similar manners sometimes on the inside. The difference is Shakur Stevenson right up on the inside, when you do get his back up against the ropes and he can't escape, to me he's not as defensively astute as when his legs are beneath him in the center of the ring and he's got an area to move back at. So that would be a terrific higher level chess fight. Loma would have to get sort of in a mid-range and seek to work there and basically land to the body, into the head, and you know, we'd have to see how that fight would go. It would be terrific. I think he would beat Kambosos. I think stylistically he would be wrong for Kambosos. I think he'd beat Devin Haney. I think stylistically he would be wrong for Haney too. Teofimo Lopez, if you still consider him a lightweight, he does have that one hitter quitter type power that could really change the course of a fight. He is a sort of guy that's a counterpuncher though, so he'll roll with shots and come back with you, and because he's so quick at being in and out, Shakur, he might not be able to time him in the way that he'd want. That'd be a great fight. Tank Davis, I believe Shakur would win the majority of the fight, but he has Tank that explosive ability whereby where he is crouched, he's not like Oscar Valdez whereby he'll have to shift with that right hand. He can shoot big powerful shots moving upwards from either hand, and although you saw Oscar Valdez land with that first attack, it would often be the second phase where he couldn't get to him when they were center ring. The second phase of attack is central to beating Shakur Stevenson when he's backs up against the ropes and he has no other escape. Tank though has the explosive speed to land even from a central position, and if he's able to, he might have a bigger effect on Shakur Stevenson than somebody like Oscar Valdez did. But make no mistake, Tank 2 would have to knock him out, in my opinion. Bear in mind, I could change these predictions. I'd want to do more film study. This is just off the top of my head, right? Ryan Garcia is another one whereby if Shakur gets up close, does Ryan have the technical know-how to deal with that? One thing I do know is that as Shakur tries to pull out with those little half steps back, Ryan's long and he's got very fast hands and he carries power too. Is Shakur going to be able to pull back and step out quickly enough where he's avoiding these shots? Is he going to be able to hunt Ryan if Ryan wants to get on the back foot? I think Ryan is taller and is rangier. Is he going to be catching him with those left hooks when he's moving backwards? Listen, all the top fighters at lightweight are quality fighters, right? But the point is, the fact that we're talking about Shakur Stevenson as potentially coming out on top, it shows you the sort of pound for pound level skill we're talking about here. He's an elite level fighter. If he stays in this weight category, of course, undisputed has to be his number one priority. But as a fan, the fight I'd want to see is a Robson Conceição fight. I felt he beat Valdez because he is also a decorated amateur, really good boxer, and he has the ability to box at range too. Because I know he's fought Jeremiah Nakatila and also Jamil Herring, but I do think Conceição's a higher level boxer than them, so it becomes a more interesting fight to me personally. One last comment I want to make before I leave. There is a fighter who's brilliant with his distance control, uses a lot of feints as well. You jump in on him and he'll take that step back and he's able to land big shots and punish you as you're trying to lean in. And that is Dmitry Bivol. And whilst Canelo Alvarez is not Oscar Valdez, he also come in behind that high guard, much better upper body movement, and he'll look to counter you and land to the body and things like that when you are the one that is leading off. He'll offer you bait and he'll use a lot of misdirection. But there's an interesting dynamic there from another Eddie Reynoso fight and Dmitry Bivol, who shares certain similarities with Shakur Stevenson. Bear that in mind. So thank you for watching, everyone. Let me know what your opinions are. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe button and notifications button. Thanks very much. Take care. God bless.